Welcome to the Casey Cease Show. Casey is your entrepreneurial guide. Dive into weekly insights that blend inspiration with practical strategies to grow your business with integrity. From boosting sales to building strong relationships, Casey shares the essentials to help both your venture and personal dreams flourish. Ready to elevate your entrepreneurial journey? Let's dive in.
Welcome back to another episode of the KCC Show. This is Casey, and I'm here with my good friend Luke Crane today. And Luke and I are going to be chatting through business and coaching and life transitions and a bunch of fun different things. And we've been buddies for several years now. I actually met Luke years ago. We were both in vocational ministry, and we're both in a preaching cohort at a church in his area when I was living in that area, and hit it off and have maintained friends. And we both entered into our journey as coaches and entrepreneurs and all that. So Luke, thanks so much for joining me today on the show. And why don't you just begin by giving us a little bit of your background and share with us about your journey, your business, and the different ways that you add value to people.
Yeah. Well, first, thanks for having me. Super pumped. Yeah, the journey's been long, awesome, and hard all at the same time. So I guess every good journey starts after college. Left college, did a little bit of specialized ministry training, and then launched a nonprofit in Texas. So we had a choice. We could go to Aurora, Illinois, which nothing against Illinois, it just sounds cold, or we could go to the Woodlands, Texas. And so the Texas kind of felt a little better. So yeah, we did ministry, started a nonprofit from the ground up, board of directors, the whole thing for 3 years, and loved it. It was just, I'd given it up my all. I was tired. Decided to go back to school, got my master's in Christian leadership from Dallas Theological Seminary. And then I started working in a church. Fun part, this kind of, it all adds up, right? So while I was in seminary, I did a part-time job working at Apple. Learned a ton, became a trainer for an Apple store, and it all bled into the end. But I left that. I started working for a church. It's where I met you. I did communications and digital strategy, which I didn't know there was a pastor title called Pastor of Communications and Digital Strategy, but there was. I think they created it for me. Worked there for almost 3.5 years, ended up running the whole communications team. Loved the team, loved what we did. Worked with creatives and worked with the whole church staff and church team, helping with communication. That time was super impactful for me, but the team was the big part. And then when I left that, I fell back into technology. I don't know why. I'm not a tech guy, but I just fell back into technology, and I ended up doing tech training for another 2 years. And I'd always told myself for the longest, like, I'm not an entrepreneur. I don't have that spirit. It's not who I am, blah, 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 blah. And I kept saying it to myself. And, you keep saying it to yourself, you start to believe it. And I truly believed it. And I was at the 3-year mark with this company, and an ad popped up. I was doing the Facebook scroll, and an ad popped up to become a coach. So I'd seen it once, and you kind of, but when you pause on it, you know this more than most with the marketing, you pause on it and they got you. I paused. So then I started seeing it all the time. So I asked my wife, I said, hey, what would you think if I left this and started my own company doing coaching? And I kid you not, these are her exact words. She said, it's about time. And when your wife says it's about time, the person who knows you the best, then it's probably past that about time. So I stayed for a little bit longer because I don't believe in jumping without full knowledge of what you're doing. So I stayed a little bit longer. I did a training course on coaching, got certified as a coach, and I got my first client. And then I left my job and branched out on my own. So that was almost 4.5 years ago. Since then, it's evolved a little bit. Coaching has always been there, but I've found different avenues of business and things that I'm good at: training, speaking in front of people, and funnily enough, developing custom curriculum. So that's what I do now. I specialize in entrepreneurs. So I really like to work with people who run the company. That's my niche. But yeah, it's been a journey. Well, it took me about 14 years to figure out what I wanted to do, but now I got it. So I don't think I'm going to stop anytime soon. That's the journey, man.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that. You've authored a book, you've created
Oh
courses,
yeah.
you've right. So there's a lot of things along the way that I think are really interesting. And I have a tendency to do that as well and take for granted kind of what I've done. I posted this on social media a little while ago. I said, I was recently talking with a friend and he was shocked to find out that I own a marketing agency. Like he just
Saw
assumed
that.
like yeah, and I was like, "Oh, yeah." I take for granted everything that I'm involved in because for me, it's just a part of life, a way of doing things. But for you, I mean, you are a strong content creator. You are great at creating courses. And so let's talk a little bit about you're an excellent coach. You really do care about the people you lead. You have the pastoral element with the strategy element and a solid business guy. How does the curriculum in your book and things like that all work together with all of that?
Yeah. So the book came from, I don't know if you probably talked to an author. It kind of welled up inside of me. I read a book about writing books, and a friend of mine had at the time said that a book is the best business card you can ever have, and business wasn't
True.
great. So I was like, cool, I need a great business card. Let's write a book. So I read a book about writing a book, and I tried doing it the book's way, and it was terrible, Casey. It was absolutely terrible. And so literally I'm sitting at my desk going, what am I going to do? This is garbage. I'm garbage. And I turned around and my bookcase was behind me. And I looked at all the books on my top shelf was my favorites, right? So it was kind of the descending. And my top shelf, it was like Patrick Lencioni, it was Ken Blanchard, like all of these fable fiction, like fable stories that people want to read, short, quick, but they have a point. And so I thought, well, if that's my favorite to read, maybe that's the kind I should write. And I have a fun degree. My undergrad is in outdoor experiential education from Appalachian State, go Mountaineers. And so backpacking and being outdoors is kind of my thing. And so I ended up writing the book about leadership from the perspective of a backpacking trip in this. And so that content flowed. Like you asked about how the content all links together. That one welled up inside of me and I had to write it. The other stuff, you know, I think it's hilarious and sad all at the same time that saying the simple thing in a simple way over and over again, it works. I don't have new ideas. I don't have grandiose ideas. But my dad told me this. He said, if you can make things simple for people, then you won't have to worry about what you're going to do. So when it comes to content, I write what makes sense. And so leadership development, whether it's, if I'm writing about communication, then I don't try to come up with a brand new shiny idea. I'm not trying to rock the boat. I just write what makes sense in a way that structure it in a way that people can read it and it makes sense. Ideas build on one another, all that kind of stuff. So it all flows together and the content is not revolutionary. I don't think I'm ever going to be revolutionary. But I do like making complex things simple. And that's the quote. When you make the complex simple, you never have to worry.
So I was speaking with one of our authors recently, and he was in an organization that would do these very simple trainings weekly with their staff. And the first 6 weeks, he's like, I'm not really into this. This is silly. And then about 6 weeks in, he's like, this is extremely helpful. And because what happened is it brought about alignment with the team. And what his error he was making as a leader in the organization was that of course people know how to actively listen. Of course people know etiquette on email. And what he found was he was shocked by how many people were acting like their mind was just blown from very basic content. And I said, the accumulation of that training, he said that it raises the level of alignment with the team. And you do have a unique gift at being able to take some complex concepts and make it very simple. And what's nice is when it's done simply, but done well, it's not condescending. It's actually liberating. And you
Yeah.
walk a very fine line because there are some things I've read, having owned a publishing company now for 17 years, that are just condescending and
Yeah.
people are trying to be helpful and they're just rude, but you actually do a very great job at breaking things down. One things that we worked on together as a project was we helped you lay out and think through the strategy of a white label curriculum for leadership development. And so that was a lot of fun for us to just think through the logistics, but watching you work through that and come up with it and then connecting with people who have purchased it and have had you facilitate through it and be blown away by the impact it's had. So how did you come up with this idea of creating a white label type of curriculum? And then how have you seen it implemented successfully?
An existing client, I was coaching, it's a firm. And so I was coaching multiple members of the firm, and I was talking with the head of the firm, and he said, I want to grow leaders, but I want to create something that has our touch and our feel to it. But I want to give them the meat, but I want it to feel like us. And so we embarked on we took 8 months to create a solid core curriculum. And funnily enough, it wasn't until after I had created the core that we had the fingerprint conversation. So that was an alignment conversation that we had where he said, this isn't what I want. Here's what I want. And I said, oh no. So I quickly, imprinted, I call it the fingerprint. I imprinted his fingerprint and the culture into the curriculum. And that's what sparked the idea of, man, if I can take the core concepts of leadership, which are everywhere, communication, accountability, all of those things, and I can put them simply, and then I can take it to different people and they can add their cultural fingerprint to it. We can have a base and they can decorate the house. We can have a frame and walls, but they get to decorate and it feels like theirs. And then that kind of sparked man, I should white label this. And for anyone who's listening who doesn't know what a white label is, it just means I made it. We get to tweak it and you get to call it your own. So that's what a white label is.
It's
so
customizable for the specific culture. The leadership principles are the leadership principles, right?
Right.
And so you've created a framework of any organization or leadership group that wants to develop leaders has, like you said, certain principles that they need to learn and understand and follow. And your unique ability is to come in with the higher ups and say, let's make it yours. And so then they have it in. But then also there's been a few large organizations that have actually invited you in to do the training as well.
Yeah, there has. And that's been super fun to be able to write the content and to deliver it. I get to expound on the ideas a little bit more and facilitate conversation around it versus just, here you go, here's your stuff. So that's been a little more intimate with the content and seeing how it resonates and what people talk about, what lands, what doesn't. It's been super fun. Watch those people get it and take it back into the workplace versus just, it's less transactional. So I've had a lot of fun hearing that and doing those trainings. In fact, I have one tomorrow. So with that company.
Yeah. So with that, how does that all work together? Your content creation, your curricula, your coaching, how do you see that as your firm continues to grow? And what is the name of your firm? We forgot to mention that.
Oh yeah. So it's a leadership cohort is the name of it, leadershipcohort.com. Cohort's a weird word to spell, COHORT, just in case you're wondering. And the idea behind it was I wanted a group of individuals who cared about leadership to come together. And so that's kind of what a cohort is. And so I wanted it to be a cohort of leaders. And so that's why I named it Leadership Cohort. Not until later did I realize that it's LC and my initials are LC. And so that works out too on a business card, in case you're wondering. But yeah, how does it all fit together? I'm an avid reader, and as I read, stuff comes out in my content. So if I'm developing curriculum, it's coming from live coaching conversations with leaders. If I hit on a pain point or I notice a theme that I talk about often, I know that theme needs to be inside of a curriculum, for example. I mentioned extreme ownership, like thinking an owner mindset. That's something that I hadn't written in the original white label, and having multiple conversations with entrepreneurs has helped me realize that ownership element needs to be in the white label for leaders as well. And so they kind of play off each other, and it keeps me fresh content for the white label. But then as I deliver on the white label and help customize that for these cultural footprints or cultural fingerprints, that also helps me go into my coaching conversations and say, hey, this is the idea, but how do we fit that to your people? Because every team is different. Every group is different. So they play off each other extremely well.
Ready to skyrocket your business and truly connect with your audience on a whole new level? Unleash the power of your story with Lucid Books. Imagine transforming your insights and experiences into a captivating book that not only cements your status as a thought leader, but also weaves a strong bond with your ideal clients. At Lucid Books, we're more than a publishing house. We're your creative partners on a journey to turn your wisdom into a masterpiece that speaks directly to the hearts and minds of your audience. Join forces with us, and let's embark on this incredible adventure together. Your story has the power to inspire, engage, and elevate. Are you ready to share it with the world?
So when you work with a client, they come to you and they say, "Hey, I need to grow." What I've noticed as a coach is a lot of clients come and their symptoms are caused by deeper issues. And so as you started coaching, did you start coaching during the pandemic or prior to or afterwards? Like when did you really kick that off?
Yeah, it started about 6 months before the pandemic.
And so
So
you've
I
coached
had
through it and following it.
yes.
And so what are some underlying themes that you've noticed with the folks that you coach going through not just that, but as you've done it now for several years, what are things that you're finding that you're really able to help coach people through beyond just the I need more sales or I need better
Yeah.
leadership? Like what are some real issues that you're finding people might be able to recognize that they would benefit from working with a coach?
Just thinking back over because you hear things repetitively. So thinking over the last couple of conversations that I've had, what immediately comes to mind is we call it limiting beliefs, but it's the head trash that we've been telling ourselves that we've allowed to become reality. And that's some of the stuff that just it gets stuck, right? It gets stuck in our heads. So I work with a lot of people on limiting beliefs, and that's a root cause, right? If you think something is truth, then you're going to act on it as truth. And so as a coach, when I have these conversations, I always tell people the only way to help crazy is to hold up a mirror. So oftentimes when they say, "Oh, I'm not good at this or I'm not good at that," my job is to hold up a mirror and go, "So you're telling me you're not good. Tell me how you're not good at that." And they fumble, but that's a root thing that I'm constantly going through limiting beliefs. Something else, when you bring on a coach, it brings on an element of accountability. Self accountability for folks is, I mean, for me, even is super hard. And, if you're a business owner, if you're just a leader in a company, self accountability, unless you're highly disciplined, and I know some people who are, and they're very few and far between, self accountability is super hard. And so to hire a coach who can come in and call you on the things you said you were going to do, coaching doesn't work without action, right? So to be able to go, "Hey, you said you're going to do this. Where are you at on that?" Even just the idea that they said it to someone is more powerful than just saying they'll do it someday, right? So the accountability element has been huge in coaching. I had one guy I talked to the other day, and he said, "I was super excited about our conversation because I got this done and this done and this done. And I wanted to tell you about it," right? So he gets to celebrate the wins, but he's also accountable to the fact that he did the things he was supposed to do and he was excited about doing them. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different conversations. I mean, coach, there's a lot of different conversations you have, but really when it comes to the root of things, that accountability and a lot of the self-doubt and limiting beliefs is a lot of what it comes to.
Yeah, I agree. I work with a lot of upwardly mobile, earning high six, seven figures, personal income a year. And there are two primary things I see, which is leadership is lonely and relationships are increasingly more complex, both at home and in the workplace, because of the level of pressure that a leader is facing as their career continues to expand, as their children age. And the cost of that type of success comes out from different places, whether it's their health or their marriage or the relationship with the children or addiction or really bad habits. Like there's a cost somewhere involved. And so it may
Yeah.
manifest as our leadership team is off or the sales are declining or the profitability is in trouble, which we address completely. But when you get behind there, I remember talking with one guy, he was very successful, but I was like, "Will anybody tell you you're wrong?" And he's like, "No."
Mm.
He's like, "And I'm begging for it." And I'm like, "Well, one, you're kind of
Yeah.
intimidating, but two, it's like you've got to invite that pushback because your success has gotten you to this level. People think you need them to do stuff, but not really speak into it." So he likes me because I'll be honest with him and direct and saying, like, "I think that's a bad
Yeah.
idea because of this and this." And I said, "I could be wrong." That may not be
Yeah.
accurate feedback, but ultimately, that kind of care shown for him actually builds even more trust in the coaching relationship. And so being able to work as a coach with these folks and have that discernment, plus with you just having so much dynamic wisdom, not only in business, but in leadership and ministry, and just you're great with people. I'm sure it opens up a lot of opportunity. You were sharing with me, I mean, typically as a coach, if someone sticks around a year, maybe 2 years, that's a really good run for you and for them. You have several that have stayed with you a really long time. And
Yeah.
how have you noticed the coaching relationship maturing over the years with people that you're working with under the method that you're coaching?
I do it. The people who've been with me for 2 years know that my coaching changed about a year ago, and it's gotten better, and I'm getting better. But one of the things that I struggled with in the beginning is kind of what you talked about is I struggled to challenge. I wanted to be a friend and I didn't want to be a coach at that point because I thought that I would offend people by calling them on their stuff. And so, I'd try to dance around the point. I'd hold up a mirror and say, is this really the case? And about a year or a year and a half ago, I read a quote and it said, coaching is comforting the afflicted and afflicting the comfortable. Comforting the afflicted, if they're in pain, you want to be the comfort. Hey, you can do this. I'm your biggest fan. Borrow some of my confidence right now. But the real fun comes in afflicting the comfortable. You talked about that person that you were coaching who it was really about them. And a job of a coach is to afflict the comfortable. And so about a year ago, my coaching changed and I started afflicting on board people. I know it sounds weird, but calling people on their stuff, saying that's not a good idea, or you've thought through that, or sometimes I fall back into the friend zone, but going, hey, let's play that out in the next year. Okay. Let's just play that out. How is that going to work out for you? With the longevity of clients, though, some really fun things have happened. I have had a couple clients who are almost at the 2-year mark, and I get to, because I know them and because we've been together for so long, I can gauge their facial expressions differently. I don't coach over the phone. I coach on video or in person. So I get to gauge the facial, and you start to read those pauses differently. What are you thinking right now? I know what you're thinking right now. I want you to say what you're thinking right now. So you get to get ahead of that a little bit. But I think the best part is to be able to go, hey, let's look back at a year ago. Like, you think times are tough right now? You called me back then and you were barely making enough money to survive, right? And now you're saying that your account being too full is your biggest problem. So can we just pause and look back for a second? And that's been the most fun with those people who've had a lot of longevity with, is helping them reflect back on the growth that they've had and realize that it truly is growth. So,
No, that's a great point. I really appreciate the way you've put that together, where the pausing to look backward, because a lot of achievers that we coach, the driven people, forget the past, right? The blinders are on and they're only grinding forward. And it's funny because when you stop and say, hey, hold on, I know we can go back to being mad or frustrated in just a minute. But if I recall correctly, wasn't it you that had blank? And sometimes I'll even mess with them and make it a little bit better sounding than it was. And like, no, it was this, our bank account was like negative 200,000, right?
yeah.
Like, I was like, was it like a negative 100,000? They're like, no, it was 200. I'm like, and where are we today? Well, we only have 1.2 million right now. I'm like, you're up 1.4 from our last conversation. Well, okay.
Yeah.
And it's funny
Say
with
that
personality types, like you're saying with coaching people, like for some reason, people with an 8 type on the Enneagram love coming to me for coaching because I'm not another 8. I have some 8. I'm a 3, wing 2, so I'm not a complete jerk, but I'll pop them on the nose. It's like a puppy when they're kind of bit and you hit them and they almost look surprised. I have one client, he's turned into a close friend. But when I pop him on the nose, he kind of looks shocked at me and then he starts smiling. Because he's like, you're the only person on the planet besides my wife that will get my attention that way.
Yeah, I have one guy, he owns a very successful music school, and he could be one of my favorite all-time coaching clients. He's so good. He stopped for a little bit and I begged him to come back. I begged him. He didn't beg me. I begged him. But when I would say like the things that he needed to hear, he'd cross his arms and he'd go, oh man, that hurts. Yep. Okay. thanks for that. We can end now. That's good. Because, and oftentimes with leaders or with business owners, it's them in their own head. You said it well. They're lonely. Every decision they make is on them. Every step is on them, and they don't have anybody to bounce ideas or challenge them. So it's super fun. It really is.
Absolutely. Well, man, what's one question I should have asked you that I didn't?
Oh, man. Well, technically, that is a question. So you just did. What's the one question you should have asked me? You should have asked me, what advice would I have for people who didn't want to be an entrepreneur, but couldn't help themselves?
So,
That's the
Luke,
question.
I have one last
Yeah.
question for you.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to someone who didn't want to be an entrepreneur, but just couldn't help themselves?
Yeah. I would tell them this, that the hardest things in life are the things that are the most gratifying. And you will never know how gratifying it is until you try. And the stats aren't great, right? We know this. The most people who start a business, they last past the 3-year mark, then they're doing really well, right? If you pass the 5-year mark, then you're in the 15, 20% of businesses that start. So you've beat out 80% of people who started their own business. But regret is not a fun pill to swallow. And I think for me, in my journey, is if I didn't know what it was like, then I would have regretted it. Even though I didn't want to be an entrepreneur. Some days, most days, I'll be real with you, most days I don't want to be. But there are the glimmer days where I get freedom. So if you're longing for freedom, do your thing. Plus, you get to, man, you got me on a rant now. Steve Jobs said, I don't want to, I'm going to butcher his quote, but basically said, I want to ding the universe, right? I want to ding the planet. You don't get to do that living somebody else's dream or working on somebody else's dream. You only get to do that if you try. So that's what I would say to someone who, what I think we talked about it, not entrepreneur. What'd you call it?
Don't entrepreneur.
Don't
That's yours.
entrepreneur.
Don't
Yeah,
entrepreneur.
don't entrepreneur. That's what I would say. And it's, you don't have to jump out of the boat. You can just see what it's like in a dinghy next to the boat for a little bit. It's not, the water's fine. Let's put it that way.
Well, Luke, where can people find you online? How can they connect with you?
Yeah, great question. I am on Instagram and Facebook, Leadership Cohort, L Cohort on Instagram, and L Cohort on Facebook. I have a personal, Luke Crane is my personal Facebook. I don't post much business on there, but I do post quite a bit and often on Leadership Cohort. Or you can find me online, leadershipcohort.com, or you can email me, luke@leadershipcohort.com. So,
well, Luke, thanks so much for taking the time to join me today, and I'm sure we'll have you back sometime soon.
thanks, Casey. Appreciate you.
That wraps up this episode of The KCC Show. Make sure to visit our website, thekccshow.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or via RSS, so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes. Or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, that would help us out too. You might also want to check out our book for business consultation, available at Lucid Books, or double your sales strategy session at Planify Agency. Be sure to tune in next week for our next episode.